presentation of Financial Crisis Recovery.
Foreclosure, short sales, bankruptcy, credit card debt, job loss, depreciating home values, money management. Peace of mind when it comes to your finances seems completely out of reach under current conditions, but there is a way to achieve it. For the next 60 minutes, you're going to find out how to cover your assets. Cover your assets.
What I find to be interesting is what people, in general public, believe that it is the amount of debt that you have that determines if you qualify. And in fact, that's not the case. It can be in the instance that you described, where you have totality of debt.
Yeah.
But if a person's got $100,000 or $200,000 of credit card debt, that'll have virtually no impact on whether they do or don't qualify for a Chapter 7 or a 13, because those debts aren't necessarily a part of the formula to determine your capacity to repay debt. And what I find to be amazing is that you could have $150,000 worth of credit card debt and be in a payment plan of $100 or $200 per month for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
The bankruptcy analysis, I always tell people, you got to look at it like it's a big jigsaw puzzle. You got to have lots of little pieces put together before you really start seeing the big picture. When I have people come in and see me, they're kind of amazed because, well, some of them bring in, they got a stack of bills. I don't want to see them. It's enough for me.
We're going to discharge them.
Well, it's because in the analysis, it's enough for me to know roughly how much debt you have and what kind of debt it is. The actual number doesn't really play into it until the very end of it if you've got some disposable income. If you don't have disposable income, I don't care.
So when you talked about the old way prior to the 2005, we were really talking about demonstrating insolvency, right?
Right.
As compared with a particular number. In today's world, let's say you're a single filer, an individual, and you've got an income that is exceeding the approximate $45,000. Although you could have an exceedingly large amount of debt, $200,000, ironically, if you're just a little bit over that, you could wind up being in a payment plan if the amount of debt that you have to pay back isn't reasonable within that 20% range that you're talking about.
If you can hit that target, and it's not a statute, it's a case decision from many years ago. The thing is, if you can put quotes around it, a meaningful repayment plan, whatever that number is, the rule of thumb I use, low 20 percentile in 36 months. If you can make that kind of a dent in your unsecured debt, you're begging for a motion to dismiss your case from the trustee's office.
Just last week, our show was about how to use bankruptcy as an asset protection tool, which I think is perplexing to a lot of people. And I know even for you, David, when you hear that, you go, huh? But in reality, we've got exemptions in the state of Minnesota. We're an opt-in state, so you can use state or federal guidelines. And the great news is that your qualified plans can be exempted all the way to $1 million, and you've got exemptions on your home equity as well. Those are pretty substantial exemptions that you have available.
$360,000 in the state of Minnesota for homestead. Actually, it's more than $1 million on the IRAs and whatnot. Now, it's I had a case not too long ago. A fella had a house in his IRA. If it wasn't in his IRA, gone. In his IRA, protected, not a problem.
So that's why we'll be talking with a gentleman named Todd Grill about self-directed retirement accounts, which could invest in real estate and exempt that just like you would a mutual fund within a retirement account, provided it's been in there, provided it's exemptable.
Well, I just want to point out that wasn't something I advise this person to do because there's a good faith element in whatever you're doing in bankruptcy. Now, for somebody to run out and put a couple $100,000 house in an IRA a month before they file, I probably wouldn't take that case.
You don't. It's not something you can quick do. But if you But it's amazing the amount of assets that you actually can carry through bankruptcy, because people tend to believe that you're just flat broke if you're going to file bankruptcy. And when you consider the exemptions that are available, that's certainly not necessarily the case.
Most people don't lose anything. Some do, but again, that's where we'll consider Chapter 13 too. The Minnesota exemptions they're very generous in the two areas that we talked about. We'll usually pick those when we've got a large amount of homestead equity, not usually a problem these days, obviously, with the housing market, or a personal injury claim that might be a big payoff. Other than that, we're usually looking at the federal statutes because there's a wild card component to that. It's kind of like when you were a kid playing poker with your buddies, one-eyed jacks and deuces. You could use them for whatever you want. Wild card in bankruptcy, you get $11,975 to protect those assets that don't have their own nice little exemption that they fit under.
So those are assets that have excess equity that you can carry through the bankruptcy.
Yeah, or there's no exemption for them, like cash, money in the bank, tax refunds, boats, those kinds of things.
And something that you don't have under Minnesota guidelines. One of the other things that I think is also a misunderstanding for most consumers is that you have the ability to protect your home, and frankly, bankruptcy can be one of the best tools there is for a person to be able to protect their home if they use it properly. And I think too often people tend to believe if I file bankruptcy, then I'm obviously going to lose my home, and that's just not the case.
Like I said, most people don't lose anything, and we get that comment, I don't want to lose my house, I don't want to lose my car, and I said, most people don't lose their house or their wheels. That's not how it works.
Very good. Well, listen, this is Todd Rooker and attorney David Kingsbury here on Cover Your Assets. By all means, we want to encourage callers. Please call in. Our call-in phone number is 651-646-8255. We would love you to call in and get your questions answered here by attorney David Kingsbury as it relates to bankruptcy, all the things that are available to you in a bankruptcy, what you can keep, what you're going to lose. And also visit us on our website, CYA21. If you have questions, feel free to go there and pose those questions. And lastly, remember that you can download the Financial Crisis Bible, and you can go find that by going to www.financialcrisisbible.com. It is a free download, so for anybody who needs information on these topics, this is a free download. Give them an enormous amount of information. We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk about how bankruptcy can be used to preserve your home and put you in a stronger financial position. And we are back. Cover Your Assets. In studio, David Kingsbury, attorney David Kingsbury. Bankruptcy is a subject that a lot of people just simply are afraid to ask questions about. And, of course, when they do or by the time they do, they're in such a distressed position that there really isn't a whole lot to be done. So if you can get these questions answered and have some sense of this, it may actually keep you out of bankruptcy, or if you're there, at least you'll know how to conduct yourself so you don't wind up in trouble if and when you actually need to wind up in bankruptcy. We're going to go to the phone lines here. We've got Dusty on the phone, so we'll take Dusty's phone call. Dusty, you're on the air. Go ahead, ask David Kingsbury your questions.
Yes, good morning, sir. The concept of it takes one for a mortgage and two to sell, and the reason for this is my partner's upside down on his house, but I'm in a position to help get rid of the second mortgage, which will eventually, we're current, but which would eventually help to refinance it. And the question is without going to get onto the mortgage, can I be added to the deed to protect the interest for the money that I'm going to give to help us get out from being upside down?
You're talking about negotiating, right? We're not talking about bankruptcy then. Is that correct?
Right. No bankruptcy. We want to put ourselves in a position.
I think he's talking about real estate and just wondering if he can get on title because he's going to put up some money and he wants to have some security. I'm not a real estate attorney. I would say sure, but you want to talk to a qualified real estate attorney about that. You can deed it, put on title anybody you want if you've got the capacity to convey title.
Yeah, and it is, your adage of one to buy, two to sell. Remember, the main thing is when you consider a home loan, whether it be first, second, or third, it doesn't matter, whatever position, when someone gives a mortgage, you don't get a mortgage, you give a mortgage. And when you give a mortgage, you give a lending institution authorization to position them as a lien holder on that title against that property. So if your buddy, conveys title and allows you to be placed on there, that conveys ownership. That means you got ownership in that property. You darn well better have an arrangement between the two of you that stipulates what your percentage of ownership is.
And if there's no equity, being on title is not going to protect you anyway. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So,
but if the question was, can you do it? The answer is probably. Your obligation, remember, is to repay the debt. If you're going to sign a promissory note to repay the debt, and the bank who is going to give you the loan wants to be able to collateralize against the asset of the home. The first question is whether or not there's even equity to justify or securitize their loan as a security interest against that property. Because if the first mortgage this gentleman has is eating up all of the equity that is within the home, and there's really not a whole lot left above that position, well, then giving that bank the ability to collateralize against the home is going to be a moot point. If there is equity, sure, it probably can be done, but as David said, you might want to consult with a real estate attorney to make certain that you're doing everything properly. And also, as David has said, anybody can convey title. You can do quit claim of interest. You can add somebody to title. You can do that. That's really not a problem. Whether or not the bank will do the loan is probably the bigger issue.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome, Dusty. All right. So, David, we ended the last segment on how we can use bankruptcy to preserve our home. One of the things that I often see is people who are in the midst of losing their home. In Minnesota, we're a statutory redemption state. But once the process of foreclosure begins and you have a share sale on the table where somebody's actually been served by a process server notification that the bank is foreclosing, they've been given the 45-day publication notification period, and thereafter, once that takes place, there is a 6